Let's take a quick, wild ride back to late 17th century Russia, a land of vast forests, endless winters, and traditions as old as the hills. The country sprawled across continents, but in many ways it felt frozen in time. Imagine a place where the streets are muddy, the air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, and men walk around with long, untrimmed beards and heavy robes. While the rest of Europe is bustling with new ideas and inventions, Russia seems content to watch from the sidelines, clinging to its ancient ways. Then, suddenly, everything changes. In storms a man who would upend centuries of tradition, Peter the Great. Peter wasn't just your average Tsar. At 6'8", he literally towered over his subjects, a giant in both stature and ambition. People couldn't help but notice him, and he made sure of it. But what really set Peter apart wasn't just his height. It was his burning obsession with dragging Russia, sometimes kicking and screaming, into the modern age. He was determined to break the old mold and force his country to catch up with the rest of Europe. Picture this. The most powerful man in Russia, travelling incognito through Europe. Yes, the Tsar himself disguised as a commoner. He worked in shipyards, learned dentistry, and soaked up every bit of knowledge he could find, from science to military tactics. He wasn't interested in royal banquets or fancy parties. Peter was on a mission to steal the secrets of the West, how they built ships, ran armies, and organised their societies. He wanted to bring those secrets home. Why go to all this trouble? Because Peter saw with his own eyes how far Russia lagged behind. He hated the idea of his country being left in the dust, and he was determined to change that. Back in Russia, Peter wasted no time. He launched a whirlwind of reforms, starting with the military. He drilled his soldiers relentlessly, determined to create a modern, disciplined army that could stand toe-to-toe with Europe's best. Out went the old musketeers, with their outdated weapons and tactics. In came new regiments, snappy uniforms, and, for the first time, a powerful navy built from scratch. Peter personally oversaw shipbuilding, hammering planks and learning the ropes alongside his men. He wanted Russia to be both feared and respected on the world stage, and he knew that meant having a military that could compete with Europe's finest. But Peter's ambitions didn't stop with the army. He set his sights on Russian society itself, determined to break the grip of tradition. Beards, once seen as sacred symbols of Russian identity, were suddenly taxed. If you wanted to keep your beard, you had to pay for the privilege. If you didn't want to shave, you paid up. And those long, flowing traditional robes. Peter ordered them cut short or replaced with European-style clothing. He forced the nobility to dress like Europeans, hoping that changing their appearance would change their mindset too. Even the calendar wasn't safe. Peter switched Russia to a new system, bringing the country's timeline closer to that of Europe, and symbolically moving Russia forward. And then came his boldest move, the creation of a brand new city, St. Petersburg. Built on a swamp at enormous human cost, it was Peter's window to the West. Thousands of workers toiled and died, but Peter pressed on, determined to give Russia a modern capital. St. Petersburg would become the new capital, a gleaming symbol that Russia was open for business, ready to engage with the world, and no longer content to look inward. Under Peter's rule, schools and factories sprang up everywhere. He wanted Russians to learn new skills, embrace new ideas, and help build a stronger, smarter nation. Peter personally pushed science and engineering, even forcing the nobility to attend classes and lectures. He believed education was the key to progress. He sent the brightest students abroad to study, demanded modern manners at court, and even tried to reform the powerful Russian Orthodox Church, breaking its grip on the state and bringing it under his control. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Many Russians, especially the old nobility and the church, hated these changes. They saw Peter's reforms as an attack on their way of life. Peter responded with an iron fist. He crushed rebellions, punished the stubborn, and made it clear that resistance would not be tolerated. His methods were often brutal, but he believed the ends justified the means. Through it all, Peter remained relentless. He was convinced that Russia's future depended on catching up to Europe, no matter the cost of money, tradition, or even lives. He worked tirelessly, often outpacing his own advisors and officials. When Peter died in 1725, he left behind a country utterly transformed. The old Russia was gone, replaced by a new, ambitious empire. Russia was now a military powerhouse, a major player in European politics, and, most importantly for Peter, the seeds of modernity had been firmly planted. The world could no longer ignore Russia. Sure, Peter's revolution came with pain, upheaval, and plenty of resistance. But his vision turned a backward, isolated kingdom into an empire ready to face the modern world head-on. The transformation was dramatic, and its effects would echo for centuries. So, next time you look at a map of Europe and see Russia looming large, remember the towering Tsar who, beard by beard and law by law, dragged his country into the modern age and changed the course of history forever.